Starting off here on the first analog console in the course, we got our Mackie 1604 VLZ3. So I just want to go through first and just explain all the different sections of the console, and we're going to start with our master section here and then eventually work our way over to the channel strips. Alright, so at the very bottom we have the main master fader right here. This is controlling the output of the main mix when you're recording your final mix to a 2-track source. This is your master level for everything. Right next to that we have our faders for our buses. Right? Buses are used for a lot of different things on the console. When recording, we use our buses to route our signal to our multi-track recorder. When mixing, you can use buses to actually make subgroups of channels, which we'll explain later on. During the mix scenario, where I was talking about doing subgroups, that's where you'd actually use these buttons to assign your buses to the main mix. All right, we have our headphone plug right here so that you can monitor what you're doing through your headphones. Directly above that we have our dBu meter. Right? This is going to be used during your level set procedure, and also something to keep an eye on when you're doing your mix down to make sure that your levels are not coming out too hot. Okay. Solo light right here, just so quick notice if you actually have a channel soloed, that will light up and flash for you just to let you know that's why you're not hearing anything else. Okay. We have our solo level right here, so that when you do solo a channel, it actually controls the loudness of that channel that you have soloed. Tape in, this is for monitoring external sources. For instance, if you had just an iPod hooked up and you just wanted to monitor it and not actually run it through the channels, we have our external sources here. Control room, volume right here. This is what you use to actually control the level coming out of the headphones that you're going to be plugged into there. Right? So it gets its signal after the master fader in most situations. So if you turn it down here, you're going to hear the volume get quieter in your headphones, as well as if you turn it down here, you also hear the volume get quieter in your headphones. Directly below that is where we actually choose what it is we want to listen to coming out of the headphone jack right here. Most of the time we're going to want to select main mix because that's where we're going to actually be sending all of our signal to. You can also monitor directly off of the buses if you wanted to do that, or that tape in, as I said, is the external input. So if you did, again, have your iPod hooked up or something like that, that would be how you can just monitor that very quickly without running it through your channels. Okay, so moving on up, we have our master aux sends right here for auxes 1 and 2. This is, again, it's kind of like a master fader for the aux sends coming out to your reverb or time-based effect, and you can also solo those sends as well. Okay, directly next to that, the white knobs here, these are our aux returns. So when you feed your effects back into the console, this is where you're going to have your level controls for the returns coming back from the effect unit. All right, and a bunch of different options here for how we can assign that, and we'll get into this stuff in a little bit when we really get into routing all of our signal around and setting up those effects. So now we're going to take a look at an individual channel strip. Right? Now we have 16 channels on this board, so what that means is we have one channel for one signal of audio right here, and then it just repeats, and you essentially have the exact same thing 16 times going down the line. So I'm just going to start up here at the top and just kind of work our way down and explain what all of these different knobs and buttons are actually used for. So at the very top we have our gain, or our preamp control. Right? This is the first point of gain staging. Right? When we plug a microphone or a line level source into the console, this is how we actually establish how loud it is coming into the channel. Right? Below that we have our aux sends. So we have auxes 1 and 2 right here, which can be shifted for pre-fader use if you're setting up a headphone mix. Right? Below that we have auxes 3 and 4. These cannot be shifted to pre-fader, so these cannot be used for a proper headphone mix. The button below that is called 5/6 shift. The whole function of that is that we actually have 6 aux sends on a channel, even though we only have 4 knobs right here. So when I hit that shift button, aux send 3 becomes aux send 5, aux send 4 becomes aux send 6. Right? So we really have 6 aux sends on a channel, even though we can really only use 4 at a time. Okay? So moving down, now looking at the EQ section of the channel strip. At the very top here we have our high shelf filter. The frequency that it is affecting is fixed. It's at 12K, which is actually written on the board. So the control here, the knob is actually just controlling the amount of boost or cut in decibels that you're going to do for everything above 12K. Right? Since it's a shelf filter, everything above that frequency, since this is a high shelf, is going to be affected. So I can boost it up anywhere from 0 to plus 15 decibels, or I can cut it back anywhere from 0 to minus 15 decibels. Okay? Below that, we have our mid-band EQ. This actually has two different knobs to control that one. So we have a frequency select. So on the mid-band, it's not a fixed frequency. We can actually establish which frequency we actually want to boost or cut on that control. So the frequency will range anywhere from 100 hertz all the way up to 8 kilohertz. Very wide-ranging EQ on it. So we have a frequency select control, and we have a boost or a cut, again, plus 15 dB or minus 15 dB. All right, moving below that, we have our low shelf EQ. Frequency on this is set to 80 hertz, and again, we can boost everything. Since this is a low shelf, we'll be boosting everything below 80 hertz up to 15 dB or cutting it back 15 dB. Directly below that, we actually have a low cut, or also known as a high pass filter, right? Set at 75 hertz, and the roll off is 18 decibels per octave. So when this is engaged, essentially the filter is cutting, completely eliminating the stuff below 75 hertz. The 18 dB per octave is talking about the rate that it actually cuts everything off. So for instance, 1 octave below 75 hertz would be 37.5 hertz. So when I engage that, 37.5 hertz is going to be 18 decibels lower than 75 hertz was. Okay, moving on down. Now we've got our pan, bus assign, and fader section right here. So pan is just your left to right control of where you want that sound to sit in the stereo field. We have our mute button to cut the channel so we're not hearing it. Solo, so that we're hearing only this channel. Right? Bus assigns, if we hit bus 1 and 2, right, that's going to send the signal to those master bus faders that we saw at the beginning of the video. And since we're selecting 2 buses with 1 button, we actually use our pan knob to control which bus we want to send to. So if we want to go only to bus 1, we pan all the way to the left, and it will only go to the odd numbered bus. Remember this, odds to the left, evens to the right. So if I want to go to bus 2, pan it all the way over to the right. We do the same thing with bus 3 and 4, or at the very bottom we have that left-right bus. That's going to send it to the main mix, and then fader is just going to control the overall output volume of this channel. Remember, the preamp is for the input volume of the channel, the fader is for the output volume of the channel. Okay, so now we're looking at the back of the 1604 console, and this is where all of your inputs and outputs are accessed from. So down across the bottom here, we have all of our basically inputs and our insert points for all 16 channels going across. So at the very bottom, we have our XLR connections here. This would be for our microphone inputs. Above that, we have our 1/4-inch line inputs. And above that, we have our insert points. The insert points are a send and return system. That's all done through one plug right here. But it's used for connecting dynamic-based processors, such as compressors, noise gates, and also the spectral effects as like an EQ or something like that. Outboard gear, something that's not actually built into the console, you would actually access into the insert point here. Okay, so all 16 of these, since it's 16 channels, again, they all repeat. So channels 1 through 16 have all the same inputs right here: the mic, the line, and the insert points. Right. So kind of looking over here at the top now, we'll move from the left across to the right. We've got our power input, the power on and off switch, and our phantom power switch right here. On the Mackie 1604, phantom power is global. What that means is that when you turn phantom power on, it's going to turn the phantom power on for all 16 microphone connections simultaneously. Right? Phantom power is used for powering up condenser microphones mostly. But there's also certain types of microphones, like ribbon microphones, that can be damaged by phantom power. So you have to be careful what's connected when you have this phantom power turned on. All right? Next to that, we have our main outs. So coming from the master fader, this would be what you would plug into to get your main stereo mix off of it. And it even has a mono plug right there, which will give you both the left and right channels summed to a single mono channel. We have another insert point here, stereo. So we have our insert point for the left side, insert point for the right side for our main mix. It's very common where you want to insert a compressor or some other type of dynamic-based effect into the master fader and affect the entire mix, as opposed to the insert points here, which only affect each channel individually. Okay, next to that we have the RCA connections for the tape in and tape out. We saw that in the master section. This would be where you would plug it in if you were connecting an iPod or CD player or DVD player for audio. The unbalanced RCA connections coming into the console and out of the console right there. Additionally, we have another output. This is our control room output. This is going to get the same signal that the headphone jack in the master section gets. This would be used for connecting to speakers instead of to the headphones. But it's controlling what you're listening to in the studio, in the control room, but not necessarily what's actually coming out of the main outputs right here. All right. Next to that, we have our 4 buses or 4 subs, the outputs. We're going to be using our buses to route to tape. So this is where the connection would actually go to the multitrack recorder, right, coming out from our 4 buses. Our stereo returns, these are our aux returns, more commonly called. This is where you're going to bring the time-based effects back into the console, right? So we have 4 stereo aux returns, which can also be run in mono if you plug only into the left input of it. Next to that, we have the aux sends. Right? As I mentioned, even though there's 4 aux send knobs on each channel, aux sends 3 and 4 can be shifted to aux sends 5 and 6. So you can actually run 6 different aux sends simultaneously with this console. After that, we have our direct outs. Direct outs are used very commonly in recording situations. It's another option in addition to using your buses to route your signal to tape. With a direct out, channel 1 would go directly to the direct out for 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4. You don't have the flexibility with direct outs to change which, for instance, with the buses, I can go to channel 1 by routing to bus 1, or channel 2 by routing to bus 2. With the direct out, it's always going to be 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4. Right? So that's the inputs and outputs of the 1604. Now I'm going to run through the steps of setting up the master section for this console. It's a pretty universal process actually for any console you come across. They all are going to have a master fader, and that's actually step 1 in setting up the section, is turn your master fader to unity. Unity is actually marked with a little U on all of the faders across the board on here. So we want the master fader right at unity. All right, we want to go to our control room section here, and we want to monitor the main mix. So we need to make sure we select main mix as the control room source. Go ahead and turn the volume for the control room up just a little bit, just so when we plug our headphones in and have signal routed, we'll be able to hear it. But we don't want to crank it because then we're going to blow our eardrums out. So just turn it up a little bit, maybe 9 o'clock, just so you can hear the signal when it gets there. Setting up your solo level, right? We want to set that to unity. For now, I'm going to leave it in AFL mode. When the button's up, you're in AFL. When the button's down, you're in PFL. AFL is used typically more when mixing. It's after fader listen is what it stands for. When you have an after fader listen, it's going to give you the same level that you heard dependent upon where your fader is at. So if your fader is turned up and you solo that channel, it's going to be loud. If the fader is turned down and you solo that channel, it's going to be quiet. PFL is a pre-fader listen. Right? So if I'm in pre-fader listen mode, what that means is as soon as I hit solo on the channel, that level is going to either jump up or fall down depending on the position of the fader. It's dependent more upon where the preamp to the input of the channel is actually selected. So basically when I have a pre-fader listen solo turned on, that fader has no effect on what I'm hearing. I could turn the fader all the way down and I would still hear that signal with that channel soloed. So for now I'm going to leave it in AFL mode because that's more typical of a mix scenario. Alright, the tape in, not using, we have no external sources connected. So the next thing is I want to go to my master aux sends and I want to turn those up to unity. Right? And again, for this console, pretty much everything is marked pretty clearly where unity is. You're going to see a U either at the top of the knobs or, like I pointed out with the faders, there's a unity position for those too. So aux sends 1 and 2, I'm going to go ahead and turn those up to unity. And as far as the aux returns, we're going to wait until we actually route to a time-based effect and bring it back in before we really start messing around with these levels, because this may not end up at unity depending on how much reverb I want. If I want a lot, it might be more. If I want a little bit, it might be less. Right? Now the aux return section here, remember we actually have 4 stereo returns. right? So left and right is both being controlled simultaneously with this. Now, aux 1 and 2, when I turn these up, that means I'm going to be listening to that reverb or that time-based effect in the main mix. Additionally, we have another aux here where we can actually send it back out to aux 1 and to aux 2, right? That would be aux sends 1 and 2, right? So we can route this signal either to the main mix or via this knob back to aux send 1. Below that, we have our stereo return 3 and stereo return 4. These have a lot more flexibility in where you can actually route them to. So if this button right here is up, that means auxes 3 and 4 go into the main mix. If I push it down, it's going to send that signal to the buses or the subs instead of the main mix. So we see we have this little kind of line right here that shows us if we're going to subs, we need to tell it which buses or which subs we actually want to send the signal to. So over here, if the button's up, we're routing it to bus 1 and 2. If that button is down, that means we're going to bus 3 and 4. So if this button is up, these have no effect. These are only affected if we're routing the return to the subs and not to the main mix. Okay? Right here, this control room phones only. That means we're going to route this stereo return only to either a headphone jack here or the control room outputs on the back, but not to the main mix. All right, and then we can also solo our aux returns if we want to hear just that reverb alone without the dry signal. So now that our master section is set up and ready to go, the next thing is we need to actually get some sound patched into the board so we can route it around and get it to the multi-track recorder. So first thing is you got to get a CD and put it in the CD player, and then go to the patch bay. And on the top row we have CD out left and right, so we want to patch those outputs to the inputs right below it here for channels 1 and 2 line inputs on the 1604. Okay. Okay, so moving over to the console now, we can see on channels 1 and 2 by these little -20 lights that we do have some signal coming into the board. So far so good. So the next step is that we're going to go to this first channel, we're going to solo it, and then go over to the master section, and we're going to set our solo mode to PFL. PFL is pretty much strictly used, turn that down, it's pretty much strictly used for the level set procedure. When mixing, you're probably going to be using AFL more than anything else. But you can also see our root solo light blinking, showing us that one of the channels is actually soloed right now. So on our dBu meter right here, this is what we're going to keep our eyes on as we're actually setting the preamp to the input of the channel. So we've got our preamp for the input of the channel right here. So we've got it soloed PFL. We're seeing just the level for this channel on the meter in the master section. So we're just going to turn up this preamp and keep our eyes on the dBu meter over there. You want to hit 0, maybe up to +4, possible peaks at +7, but really between 0 and +4 is where you want that to kind of, that's what you're aiming for the level to be hitting consistently. Now that the level's set for channel 1, we're going to turn the solo off for that. Solo our next channel to dial in the level. Again, looking at the master dBu meter by the stereo master fader, just turn our preamp up and aim for getting those levels between 0 and +4. So now we'll take channel 2 out of solo since the level is set for it and return our solo mode back to AFL. So now that we're going to actually route signal into the 1604 and route it to the multi-track, which we're using the Alesis ADAT HD24 for that at this station, we need to actually make sure we set a new project because we don't want to record over anybody else's projects that are already on here. So the file structure of this unit, you basically have folders which this unit calls projects. So within the projects is where all the actual songs are stored. So you can have up to 99, I believe, projects in here and 99 songs within each project. So again, think of the projects as folders. So we're just going to stick with project number 1 for now. And by hitting this song select button on the top right, you go back and forth between whether you're scrolling through the projects or actually scrolling through the songs themselves. All right? So we're within project 1. We hit that song select, we can see we're on project 1. We hit song select again, and now we have a list of the songs. So at this point, we want to create a new song. That's that button called new song, right? Just below the song select button, we hit that, and it's going to ask us, do we want to create a new song? Hit the yes button on the blue crosshairs. Sample rate 44.1 kilohertz. Press new song to confirm that. We want 44.1. Number of tracks, 8. We can do anywhere from 8 to 24 tracks. Since we just have 4 buses on the 1604, we really don't need more than 8 tracks. So again, we hit new song to confirm that. And we have our new song here. All right, we can rename the song by hitting the name button right here and use the up and down and left and right arrows here to scroll through the different letters so you can actually title the song with your name if you need to get back to it at any point in time. So now we need to route our signal from channels 1 and 2 to our tape tracks. All right, so we need to decide which 4 tape tracks do we want, or which of the 4 tape tracks do we want. We can go to tape tracks 1 and 2 or 3 and 4. So for this case, I'm just going to go to 1 and 2. So we want to raise our faders, our input faders here for the channel to unity. Right? Assign it to bus 1 and 2. Since it assigns in stereo pairs like that, we need to make sure we follow our panning. Left for the odd numbered bus, right for the even numbered bus. So what that means is I'm sending channel 1 to bus number 1, and I'm sending channel 2 to bus number 2. Now we raise our bus faders up to unity. Since we routed to buses 1 and 2, those are the only 2 faders we need to bring up. So now we go back to the multi-track recorder, and since we routed it to buses 1 and 2, it's going to show up on tape tracks 1 and 2. So let's hit record arm for those 2 channels. And we should only be getting signal on those channels. If I record arm 3 and 4, as you can see, we have no signal there because nothing's been routed to buses 3 and 4 on the 1604. Now looking at my level coming in, it's a little bit low. Right? Not terribly, but it's a little bit low for what I'd like for recording purposes. So I'm actually going to go back to my bus faders, which are the last part in the gain stage process as far as signal flow goes before it hits the multi-track recorder. I'm just going to turn those up a little bit just so we get some better signal coming in. All right. Obviously want to make sure we don't hit any peaks. We want to hit those yellow lines, but we don't want to hit any red. So the 1604 console is a split console. That means you use separate channels for the input, in this case from the CD player, and a separate set of channels for the returns from the multi-track recorder. So channels 1 through 8 are our input channels, and channels 9 through 16 are our monitor channels, the returns from our multi-track recorder. And as you can see, Mackie has conveniently labeled channels 9 through 16 with the tape track numbers that are actually returning to them. So since we routed to tape tracks 1 and 2, we can see we've got activity coming back from tape tracks 1 and 2. So now we need to do our level set procedure just as we did for our inputs for our monitor channels here. So again, PFL for our solo mode. Go ahead and solo channel 9 to hear tape track 1. Watching our dBu meter, just adjusting our preamp so that we're getting, again, between 0 and +4. Occasionally hitting +7 is fine. Right, level looks good on that one, so we turn off the solo for channel 9, solo channel 10, just our preamp while watching the meter. Alright, levels look good there. Let's turn off our solo, and let's make sure we return our solo mode back to AFL. So now, since this is our monitor section, this we want to send directly into the main mix. So at the very bottom, you have that LR button. That's going to assign the channels to the main mix. You want to pan channel 9 to the left, channel 10 to the right. Pull our faders up, and now we should have some signal in our headphones. So now we've got our monitor mix set up. We've assigned everything to the main mix. We're hearing it in our headphones. So now we need to set up the mix for our artist, the Q mix. So for this console, we're going to use aux sends 1 and 2. We have to use 1 and 2 because those are the only 2 on this console that can be pre-fader. We want to send their signal pre-fader so that if we move our faders or our pans or mute the channels or anything like that, while the artist is recording, it doesn't affect what they hear in their headphones. All right, so on channels 9 and 10, we want to make sure we hit pre-fader for auxes 1 and 2, and then for the left side of the headphone mix, we turn up aux 1. Remember, odds for left, evens for right. So we turn up aux 1 on channel 9, we turn up aux 2 on channel 10. At this point, plug your headphones into the jack on the desk, and you should be able to hear the artist mix. And we already set up the master aux sends when we set up the master section, remember. So to get the overall level that you want, loud or quiet, just go to these auxes and play with them up and down, try and get the panning even between the left and the right. So we've got our mix in our headphones. We've got the artist set up with their Q mix, but this singer, whatever recording, probably wants to hear some reverb or something like that while they're recording. So now we need to set up some time-based effects that we can route both into our mix and into the Q mix. So we're going to use aux sends 3 and 4 from the Mackie 1604 for that. So we're going to go to the patch bay, and we're going to actually patch so that we can get signal from aux sends 3 and 4 into the Microverb, which is the reverb unit we're using for this station. Inputs, left and right. Okay, now that we have the patching done for the routing of it, now we want to go over back to our return channels, our monitor channels. You always send your effects post-tape, right? You always want to monitor via the multitrack recorder. That way, if anything goes wrong, the hard disk fills up and cuts off the recording time, it'll be audible. You'll be able to hear what's actually going on. So we want to go to channels 9 and 10, right? Just like we did for our headphone mix, but this time we're using aux sends 3 and 4. There's no masters for aux sends 3 and 4 on this console, so we just need to go to the channel, and again we turn up the odd, aux 3 for the left send, and the even, aux 4 for the right send. So when we turn up aux 3, we get a signal on the left side, and when we turn up aux 4, we get our signal on the right side. Remember, odds left, evens right. Okay? And make sure you're not hitting that clip light on here. Right? You want pretty decent loud signals as long as you're not getting any red lights at all. Alright? So I want to go over the controls of this unit very briefly, just so you guys know what it is you're actually working with here. So on the left side of the Microverb, see we have input, mix, and output. So input, you could think of that as kind of like the preamp for the unit. Typically, we want our input and our output to be set at unity, right? 12 o'clock. Output's kind of like that fader, right? So you have an input gain control, and output gain control. And then the mix. Mix, in this setup, you always want to leave all the way wet. Right? It's a blend between the original dry signal being fed into it and the actual affected reverb that's coming back off of it. Since we already have the dry signal on the board and we just want the wet signal coming to the aux returns that we can blend together, we want to leave this at 100% wet all the time. So, main screen here, we've seen we have our input meter so we can see the signal being fed into it. Right here we have it showing us which preset is currently loaded up. So right now we're using preset 37, and there is a kind of brief description of what all the different programs are via banks. Basically, the first 10 programs are all going to be different types of hall reverbs. 10 through 19 are room reverbs, and on down the line. And then it also shows you we have this edit A and edit B. It's going to tell you exactly what parameter you're actually affecting when you turn this. And as you can see, when you turn these knobs on the screen, it's going to display the value for that knob. All right? In the binder that you guys have at the book, there's a more detailed description of every individual preset, so you might want to turn to that to find the exact effect you're looking for. But for now, we're going to go with a hall reverb. So we'll just go and take this value and just go all the way back down to 0 with it. That's the very first hall reverb effect that's on there. And for this one, edit A is your decay, meaning how long is the reverb going to go? How long does it take for the reverb to decay off? All right, so bring this down a little bit. And edit B is going to be a high cut, basically kind of an EQ for the reverb, right? The further you turn it up, the more high end you have, the more treble you hear. The more you turn it down, the less high end, less treble you'll actually hear in your reverb. Right? And now to bring the effects back into the console, we patch from the Microverb out, left and right, to aux returns 1 and 2, which is kind of hard to see in this spaghetti that we have of patch cables going here, but on the bottom left we have aux returns 1 and 2, so that's where I'm going to put my patches. Now that we have our signal patched back into the board, coming back from the Microverb, first thing I want to do is get the reverb into the main mix. So we go to aux returns 1 and 2. As I mentioned before, these are stereo returns, but the way we have it wired up here at SAE is that actually stereo return 1 will turn up reverb on the left side, and stereo return 2 will turn up reverb on the right side. Again, staying consistent with that odds left, evens right thing. Now to get the reverb into the headphone mix, the Q mix for our artist, as we can see, aux return 1 can then be sent to aux send 1, aux return 2 can be sent to aux 2. So if we go over here, we turn up aux 1 for the left side of the Q mix and aux 2 for the right side of the Q mix. Again, if you plug into the jack that's on the desk at the 1604 station, you should be able to hear the Q mix. So play around with the stereo imaging of these things and just really get comfortable with how to balance it between the left and the right. So we've got our Q system set up. We've got time-based effects set up for both our mix and the artist mix. So the next thing I want to do is actually patch in the compressor to the main stereo bus insert. Right? Now it's Good to note here that when anything I patch into the main insert will be heard by us in the main mix, but the artist will not hear it. The artist is not monitoring the main mix, so any compression I do at this point will not affect what the artist is actually hearing. So the patch point for this is we're going to the stereo insert send, left and right, into the 266 in. 266 is the compressor we have at this station, the DBX 266. And then to complete the patch, we need to take the output of the 266, left and right. Now we're really starting to get some nice spaghetti going here, right? Into the stereo insert return, right? So sending from the, essentially that master fader into the compressor, and then out of the compressor back into the master fader. So this is the DBX 266 compressor and gate unit right here. So before we really get any further with it, I want to kind of explain what we're actually looking at with these controls. Right? So from left to right, these are our controls for our gate. For the situation we're working with here, where it's patched into the master fader, the main mix, I don't really want to use the gate. So I'm going to leave these turned all the way counterclockwise so that they're essentially off, right, and not having any effect. An expander and a gate the gate kind of works as a automatic mute button, right? And I don't want to be muting my main mix off and on, so that's why I want to turn these off. Okay? So from here on over, these are our controls for our compressor. This is what I actually want to be using for it. So threshold control, this is essentially what you're going to use to establish how much compression, how much gain reduction you're actually going to create. And you can see it'll tell you when the signal is above or below threshold. Right. Over easy is essentially a soft knee control. That'll make a little more sense when you actually get to the effects class, but it's basically more of a gentle compression. All right. Ratio is essentially how harshly you want the compressor to attack the level. What it's doing is it's kind of working as a fader, right? When the signal goes above threshold, it's going to essentially pull the fader down. It's going to drop the level. So you'll actually see this gain reduction knob moving as it's doing compression, and it's telling you how many dB essentially is pulling this virtual fader down as it's doing its work. Okay, so we have our attack and our release here, and if you're lazy, you can set it to automatic. Right? I don't want to do that because I want to be able to tweak the sound and make it sound as good as possible. So we have a control from fast to slow, and basically what that's controlling is as the signal goes above the threshold, how fast does it bring that gain down? Right? You can see the more I slow it down, the less it actually is kind of reacting, because the signal is going up and down in levels so fast that the compressor is not attacking fast enough to react, right? And as I move this to fast, you can see that it really starts jumping and really kind of moving back and forth real quick. Release is kind of same idea, but whereas attack is how fast is it pulling this virtual fader down, release is how fast is it pushing this virtual fader back up. So when the threshold drops back below, or when the audio drops back below the threshold, how slowly does this recover up here? Or how fast does it recover? Right? Last stage is we have our output gain. If we're getting 10 dB of gain reduction on our meter here, we want to compensate for that by adding gain back to it. Because we're making the overall level quieter, we need to compensate by giving it some makeup gain. Now, just because we're getting 10 dB of gain reduction here doesn't necessarily mean we want exactly 10 here. You need to kind of listen to it, right? So with your headphones on, listen to it with it working, and then bypass it, and it should be about the same level at that point. So that's kind of what you're going for. When you hit that bypass button, you shouldn't hear the volume jump up or jump down any. It should be about the same. All right, and then our last control here, stereo couple. Since we are using this on stereo channels, whether it's your master fader or your pre-tape channels 1 and 2, we're going to be using it in stereo, meaning both the left and the right channels working together. So when you hit that button, basically this left channel 1 acts as the master, and the channel 2 on the right side will just copy anything that you do on the controls here. Okay, so now to patch in our pre-tape channels, meaning anything that we patch into this compressor will actually get routed to tape and will actually be recorded. We're going from the channel 1 and 2 insert sends, again into the 266, that's our compressor at this station. So we have 266 in, left, and right. And then to complete the insert patch, we need to take the output of the 266, and return that to channels 1 and 2, insert returns, which are hiding right down here. So now that we have the compressor patched in pre-tape, our signal flow is all very different. When we had it patched into the master fader, the only person that really could hear the compressor doing its thing was us listening to the main mix. The artist didn't hear it because they're listening off of aux sends 1 and 2, so it didn't affect what they were hearing. Now that we have it patched into channels 1 and 2, it's going to affect everything, right? It's patched in pre-tape. So anything that we do with the compressor is going to affect the levels here. If you can see, I turn the output gain down on here, the levels drop on the multi-track recorder. I boost it up, you see the levels boost up, and if you're not careful, you can clip your multi-track recorder like this. So if it's getting recorded through the compressor, that means the artist and their cue mix is going to hear all the changes we make, as well as us in the control room, right? This is basically affecting everything down the line because we're compressing the signal before it even gets to the multi-track recorder. Okay, so now we've gone through the whole signal flow tutorial here. I would recommend coming back to this station as much as you can and just going back through this process over and over until you can do it in your sleep, right? You don't need this video, you don't need the binder that we give you, you don't need your notes for class, you just have all of this stuff down and you remember all of your pre-tape, post-tape, insert points and all of your patching. But with that being said, when you're done with your lab for the day, when your 2-hour block is done, you have to make sure you normalize the whole station, right? So that's going to come down to disarming your tracks, making sure that the microverb and the DBX compressor are normalized, make sure you unpatch all of your cables, return these to the supervisors when you're done, and also going back to the console itself and putting all the controls back to their normal state on there also.